As you settle into your bed and close your eyes, let the quiet of the night surround you like a gentle embrace. Imagine the soft snow falling outside, muffling the world in peaceful stillness. In a little cottage by a warm fire, a young girl named Lila writes a wish that no gift could wrap. On this Christmas Eve, as the stars twinkle above, let your heart open to the magic of love and memories, where wishes are carried on the wind and dreams lead us to the people we hold most dear. Drift off now with the promise of a love that never fades, and let this story guide you into a peaceful, restful sleep. On the edge of the sleepy village, in a tiny candlelit cottage nestled beneath the sighing pines, young Lila sat alone. She had a single piece of parchment before her, and a quill that trembled in her hand, as if hesitant to carry the weight of what she wished to say. Outside, the snow fell silently, blanketing the ground and the tops of houses, muffling the world in quiet wonder. But the hush around her felt heavier than the beauty of winter, laden with a sorrow only she seemed to know. It was Christmas Eve, and the villagers had long since retreated into their homes, warming themselves beside crackling fires, tucking children into bed, and whispering promises of surprises to come. But here, in this cottage, no cheerful laughter danced in the air. No tree adorned with twinkling lights stood in the corner. The only glimmer was the faint glow of the coals in the fireplace, casting shadows that seemed to flicker and whisper, as if they too were secrets bound by silence. Taking a steadying breath, Lila dipped her quill into the inkwell, her fingers chilled as if even her bones knew the weight of this moment. She hesitated, staring at the blank parchment. She thought of the tales she'd heard, the ones where children wrote letters to Santa asking for things that could be wrapped in shiny paper and topped with bright ribbons. Dolls, toys, and treats that would gladden their hearts come Christmas morning. But her heart carried a different kind of wish, one that wouldn't fit inside any box, that no hands could wrap. At last, with trembling fingers and a heart full of longing, she began to write. "Dear Santa," she inscribed slowly, her words delicate as frost on a winter morning. "If you're truly real, I don't want toys or treats this year. I only wish to see my mom again, if only for one night." Her hand paused, and she felt a tear slip down her cheek. She blinked quickly, swallowing against the ache that tightened in her chest. Every Christmas Eve for the past 3 years, she had sat at this very table, watching the same snow fall, the same silence fill the room, hoping that somehow this wish would be heard. The memory of her mother's voice, soft as the snowfall outside, seemed to brush against her heart. She could still recall the warm way her mother would pull her close, the scent of pine and cinnamon clinging to her woolen scarf. It had been 3 winters since her mother had left them, gone as suddenly as the stars that vanish with the morning light. leaving only a shadow where brightness had been. Lila read over her letter, her lips moving silently over each word, as if giving them breath and life. With one last glance, she folded the parchment and slipped it inside an envelope. She had read that Santa's helpers would find letters tucked beneath pillows, or left on mantles, or carefully placed by fireplaces. But this was not an ordinary wish, she thought. This was not a wish meant for ordinary ears. So she made her way to the window, unlatching it and pushing it open just enough to let the cold night air drift in, mingling with the warmth inside. The snowflakes that had seemed so distant now gathered on her hand, delicate stars melting against her skin. She placed the letter on the windowsill, knowing that if magic were real, if wishes were heard, the night would find a way to carry it. With her heart full of hope and fear, she leaned forward, closing her eyes. She whispered her wish once more, softly, as though her mother might hear it from wherever she was. Just one night, Mama. Just one night to see you again. The wind stirred, catching the edge of the envelope, and in a swift, silent moment, it slipped from the sill, vanishing into the star-specked darkness. Lila watched as it was carried away, floating higher and higher, as if invisible hands were guiding it toward the stars. She closed the window, her breath fogging the glass, and climbed back into bed, drawing her blankets around her tightly. As she drifted into a restless sleep, her final thoughts were of her mother's warm smile and the hope that perhaps this year would be different. The days drifted by like snowflakes falling quietly in the night, each one the same, soft and silent, dissolving into the next. Lila waited, her heart wrapped in a fragile hope, the way one might cradle a flickering candle against the wind. Each evening she sat by her window, searching the horizon for any sign, any glimmer that her letter had been read, that her words had reached some distant, magical realm. But the world outside remained still, the snow undisturbed, the silence deep and unbroken. As Christmas approached, Lila felt the weight of the silence grow heavier, settling in her chest like stones. The other children in the village had begun to chatter about the gifts they hoped for, the Christmas treats they imagined awaiting them. But these thoughts brought Lila no comfort, no excitement. Instead, each laugh and gleeful shout reminded her of the emptiness she carried, the unanswered wish she held, like a tiny fading ember in the hollow of her heart. Her father, a quiet, thoughtful man who had grown quieter still since her mother's passing, noticed the shadow over her. But he said nothing. He knew too well the longing that filled her heart, the sorrow that had settled like a chill in their little home, lingering in the corners like the scent of winter pine that never left. And so he let her be, trusting that time, in its slow and silent way, would bring her solace. Yet, on the night before Christmas Eve, something changed. It was late, and Lila had already climbed into bed, though her eyes remained wide open, tracing patterns in the darkness above. A faint, restless wind slipped through the cracks of her window, carrying with it the scent of snow and something else. A sweetness she couldn't quite place. Something like pine needles and spice. Familiar, yet elusive. She sat up, her heart quickening, her senses attuned to the faintest of sounds. That was when she heard it. A soft, delicate chime, like a bell ringing somewhere far away. It was so faint, she thought, at first, she must have imagined it. But then it came again, clearer this time, carrying through the night air like a whisper meant only for her. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet brushing against the cold wooden floor as she moved toward the window. The world outside was cloaked in a blanket of fresh snow, undisturbed and glistening under the faint glow of moonlight. But there, beside the frost-dusted glass, lay something small and red, a pouch no bigger than the palm of her hand, resting as if it had been placed with care, waiting to be found. Her breath caught as she reached out, her fingers trembling with a mixture of wonder and trepidation. The pouch was soft, its fabric woven with tiny golden threads that shimmered in the faint light. Carefully, she opened it, her heart pounding as she tipped its contents onto her hand. Out fell a tiny slip of paper, curled like a leaf and edged in delicate gold. She unfolded it, and there, written in a script finer than any she had ever seen, were words that seemed to pulse with a faint, ethereal glow. "Tonight, your heart shall guide you." The words filled her with a strange sense of warmth, a feeling that prickled at the edges of her consciousness, stirring a forgotten memory she couldn't quite place. She held the slip of paper close, as if the warmth it carried might seep into her fingers, her heart. Questions flooded her mind. Who had left this message? How had it come to her, here in the dead of night, when the village lay still and silent? She searched the darkness outside her window, looking for a figure, a shadow, anything to explain the mystery that had unfolded before her. But the snow-covered ground lay pristine, untouched by any footsteps. Still, the message was clear, undeniable, and as she read it again, she felt a strange, inexplicable certainty settle over her. The wish she had sent out into the world had not gone unanswered. Something, or someone, had heard her plea. Her heart felt lighter, warmer, as if the heavy silence that had lingered around her for so long was beginning to lift, replaced by a quiet, secret magic that seemed to shimmer in the air. Lila tucked the slip of paper into the pocket of her nightgown, feeling its warmth against her chest, close to her heart. She climbed back into bed, her eyes wide, her mind racing with thoughts of what the message might mean. The night around her seemed to hum with a newfound energy, the silence now filled with a promise she didn't yet understand. As she drifted into sleep, The faint chime of the distant bell echoed in her dreams, calling to her, guiding her towards something hidden, something that waited just beyond the veil of night, where wishes whispered in the dark could find their way into the light. The clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing softly through the cottage, weaving themselves into the hush of the night. Lila lay still, but sleep eluded her. The slip of golden-edged paper lay beneath her pillow, its words whispering through her mind, filling her with a strange, almost electrifying sense of expectancy. She closed her eyes and breathed in the quiet, feeling the stillness around her deepen, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Then, just as the last echo of midnight faded, she felt it, the faintest stirring in the air, a gentle, otherworldly hum that seemed to brush against her skin like a sigh. Her eyes flew open. A soft, silvery light had filled her room, casting long shadows that danced and shimmered along the walls. She sat up, her heart pounding, captivated by the strange glow that seemed to have no source, illuminating the room with a light that was neither moon nor starlight. She felt as if she were caught between waking and dreaming, suspended in a world just beyond reality. Slowly, as if in a trance, Lila rose from her bed, her gaze drawn to the window. There, etched in frost on the glass, were patterns more intricate than any she'd ever seen. Swirling vines and curling leaves, delicate stars that seemed to sparkle with a life of their own. She pressed her fingers to the cold glass, and as she did, the patterns shifted, rearranging themselves to form an unmistakable path of light that seemed to lead away from her cottage and into the deep, dark woods. The world outside had changed. The familiar landscape she had known all her life now seemed filled with mystery, cloaked in a shimmering, silvery veil that beckoned her forward. She felt her breath catch, her heart drawn toward the unknown, as though some ancient magic were calling to her, awakening a part of her that had been dormant, waiting for this very night. With a mixture of wonder and trepidation, she turned from the window, her eyes falling on her warm coat, hanging by the door. She wrapped it around her shoulders, its worn wool comforting, grounding her even as her heart danced with a strange, restless energy. As she moved toward the door, her hand brushed the golden-edged note still tucked into her pocket, its message echoing in her mind. "Tonight, your heart shall guide you." Quiet as a whisper, she opened the door and stepped out into the snow. The air was sharp and clear, filled with a cold that bit at her cheeks, but she barely felt it. The lighted path stretched before her, weaving through the trees in a delicate glow that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, leading her onward. She followed, her footsteps barely disturbing the snow, which shimmered beneath her feet, as if the ground itself were woven with stars. The deeper she ventured into the woods, the stranger the world around her became. Trees she had known since childhood now appeared taller, their branches reaching into the sky like spindly fingers. Soft, silvery blue leaves rustled as she passed, their shadows twisting and shifting in the light. And in the corners of her vision, she caught glimpses of shapes and figures that vanished the moment she turned her head. Small, glowing creatures flitting between the branches, casting their delicate shadows onto the snow. In the distance, a soft melodic hum filled the air, blending with the chime of bells she had heard before, calling her forward. The sound was like a song without words, haunting and beautiful, echoing with a sense of longing that resonated deep within her. She moved faster now, her heart racing, her mind filled with questions she dared not speak. After what felt like both an eternity and only a moment, she came to a small clearing. In its center stood the largest, most ancient tree she had ever seen. Its trunk wide and gnarled, its roots twisting beneath the snow like the tendrils of some sleeping giant. The tree was adorned with tiny golden lanterns that glowed softly, illuminating its bark and casting a warm, comforting light onto the snow-covered ground. And there, at the base of the tree, stood a figure cloaked in emerald robes, tall and silent, like a statue come to life. His face was hidden beneath a deep hood, but as she approached, she felt his gaze upon her, intense and knowing, as though he could see into the very heart of her wish. "Lila," he spoke, his voice deep and resonant, like the rumbling of distant thunder, yet gentle as a lullaby. "You have been heard." A shiver ran through her as she met his hidden gaze, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She wanted to speak, to ask 100 questions, but no words came to her lips. She could only stare, waiting, sensing that her life was on the verge of something both terrifying and wondrous. The figure extended a hand, motioning her forward, and she stepped closer, feeling as though she were moving through a dream. Beneath his touch, the bark of the ancient tree seemed to shift, its surface parting like a curtain, revealing a hidden doorway bathed in soft golden light. With a nod, he gestured toward the entrance. "Go forward, Lila. Beyond lies the path to the place where wishes live. Your heart shall lead you to what you seek." Her chest tightened, her heart filling with a mix of fear and hope as she stepped through the doorway, leaving behind the world she knew and entering a realm woven of magic, of dreams, and of the quiet, untold mysteries that lingered in the dark. As Lila stepped through the doorway in the ancient tree, the world around her transformed. She found herself in a forest unlike any she had known, where shadows and light wove together in strange harmony, casting everything in a twilight glow that made the air feel heavy with mystery. She took a deep breath, and the air tasted faintly sweet, tinged with the scent of pine, cinnamon, and something richer, like earth after a long-awaited rain. The path ahead was narrow and winding, lined with tall, silvery trees whose leaves glowed faintly, as though each one held a tiny ember. Their branches arched overhead, creating a canopy that seemed to ripple with each of her steps, as if the forest itself were alive, aware of her presence. She moved forward, feeling the warmth of the golden slip of paper against her heart. Its words, "Tonight, your heart shall guide you," echoing in her mind, urging her onward. With each step, the shadows around her deepened, and the path grew steeper, twisting and turning through the forest. Yet, despite the darkness, she felt no fear, only a strange calm, as if she were being held in the quiet embrace of an ancient magic that had known her wish long before she'd ever spoken it. Suddenly, a soft, iridescent glow caught her eye. A stream appeared beside the path, its water sparkling as though it were woven with stardust. It flowed gently, winding alongside her like an old friend, its surface rippling with colors that seemed to change with every glance. Lila stopped, captivated, watching as tiny luminescent fish darted just beneath the surface, their bodies casting faint halos of light that flickered and danced. Drawn by an irresistible curiosity, she knelt by the stream and peered into its depths. Beneath the shimmering surface, she glimpsed fleeting images, fragments of memories that didn't feel like her own. She saw a child laughing, a mother's arms wrapping tightly around her, a golden evening under a violet sky. The images slipped away as quickly as they appeared, like water slipping through her fingers, leaving only a soft ache in her heart, a longing that belonged to her and to someone else, mingled together like rivers converging in a vast hidden sea. As she rose to continue her journey, the air around her thickened, filled with a humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ground beneath her feet softened, becoming carpeted in thick moss that gleamed like silver under the twilight. And then, before her, a magnificent archway appeared, formed entirely of intertwining branches and vines, each leaf casting a faint glow. It felt like a gateway to another world, a threshold to a place where dreams and wishes had shape, substance. Passing through the archway, she entered a vast clearing bathed in a warm golden light. The clearing was bordered by trees larger than any she had ever seen, their branches stretching impossibly high, their leaves shimmering as though kissed by ancient magic. And at the center of this clearing, as if carved from the very heart of a long-lost star, stood a castle of crystal and stone, delicate and ethereal, rising toward the sky like a frozen flame. The sight took her breath away. The walls of the castle glistened with every color of the spectrum, their surfaces shifting and changing, reflecting the golden light like 1,000 mirrors. It felt like the heart of the world itself, a place where time stood still, where wishes waited in quiet patience to be found. As she approached the castle, she felt a soft warmth on her cheek, as though someone had touched her, familiar and gentle. She turned and her heart skipped. A shadow moved beside her, delicate and graceful, with eyes that glistened like stars. It was her mother, just as she remembered. Her face soft with a smile that seemed to hold every word Lila had ever wished to hear, yet without saying a thing. "Mom?" Lila's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with disbelief and hope. But her mother only smiled, her eyes filled with a deep, enduring love, reaching out to take Lila's hand. The touch was warm, real, grounding her as if to reassure her that this moment, impossible as it seemed, was no dream. Together, hand in hand, they walked toward the castle, the silence around them filled with the quiet joy of a reunion that needed no words. They climbed the crystal steps that seemed to form beneath their feet, leading them to a grand hall where the walls shimmered with soft lights, casting their reflections back at them like echoes of memories long past. In that hall, her mother turned to her face radiant, yet touched with a sadness that felt as timeless as the stars. She knelt to Lila's height, her gaze steady, her hands warm as they held her daughter's. "I cannot stay long, my love," her mother murmured, her voice gentle, resonant with both joy and sorrow. "But know that I am always with you, closer than you know. This place," she gestured around them at the castle, the shimmering hall, "it lives in your heart, and whenever you feel lost, remember this light, this love. It will guide you." Tears blurred Lila's vision as she threw her arms around her mother, feeling the warmth, the familiarity, the love that had been missing for so long. The air seemed to pulse with their shared heartbeat, and for a moment they were one, bound by a love that reached beyond life, beyond time. As the first light of dawn began to touch the edges of the hall, her mother's form grew fainter, like mist evaporating in the sun. But before she vanished completely, she pressed a gentle kiss to Lila's forehead, a whisper of warmth and memory. And as Lila watched her mother fade, she felt no sorrow, only a peace that filled her to the brim, a promise that this moment would never truly leave her, that her mother's love was woven into the very fabric of her being, as eternal as the stars that glimmered in the distant sky. With one last look at the castle, she turned, retracing her steps, carrying the memory with her like a lantern that would light her path, even in the darkest of nights. When Lila stepped back through the archway and into the familiar woods, the magical realm she had left behind seemed like a fading dream, slipping softly into memory. The shimmering path of light that had led her there was gone, and the quiet, familiar stillness of the forest greeted her. The only sign of her journey was the faint warmth that lingered in her heart, a glow that seemed to settle there like a quiet flame, steady and unbreakable. The sky above had begun to lighten, soft shades of dawn bleeding into the deep blue of night. She walked back toward the cottage, each step bringing her closer to the world she knew. Yet she felt forever changed, as though a new light had been kindled within her, a gift far beyond the wish she had first carried. As the cottage came into view, Lila felt a gentle ache in her chest, a bittersweet longing for the touch of her mother's hand, for the sound of her voice. But now the ache was different. It wasn't sharp or heavy, but soft, filled with a warmth that soothed and comforted her. She felt as though her mother's presence had woven itself into her very being, leaving behind a piece of herself that would always remain close. Stepping inside, she found the cottage quiet and still, her father asleep in his chair by the fireplace, his face softened by the flickering glow. The room felt smaller now, simpler, as though the secrets it once held had opened like petals, revealing themselves and then folding back into something quiet and precious. Lila slipped quietly across the room and settled into a chair by the fire, watching the flames dance, their soft light casting gentle shadows that reminded her of the magical forest, the crystal castle, and her mother's smile. In the silence, she reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around something small and smooth. She pulled it out, a single crystal, clear and delicate, its surface etched with faint patterns of stars. She hadn't noticed her mother slipping it into her pocket, but she knew, with a quiet certainty, that it was meant to be a reminder, a keepsake of their night together. She held it close, feeling its cool surface warm beneath her touch, feeling the quiet pulse of magic that still lingered within it. Her father stirred, his eyes blinking open as he noticed her there by the fire. A soft smile crept over his face, the kind of smile that held both relief and a question he couldn't quite bring himself to ask. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured, his voice thick with the remnants of dreams. Lila shook her head, a gentle smile playing at her lips. She wanted to tell him everything, to share the story of the hidden kingdom, of the castle made of stars, of the fleeting yet eternal moments she had spent with her mother. But something held her back, a quiet sense that this was a story meant for her heart alone, a treasure to keep close. Instead, she simply said, "I had a beautiful dream." Her father nodded, his gaze softening as though he too could feel the gentle warmth that filled the room. He didn't press her for more. Perhaps, in his own way, he already understood. They sat together in the quiet glow of dawn, listening to the gentle crackle of the fire, letting the warmth wrap around them like a blanket. Outside, the first light of Christmas morning crept over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the snow-covered world. It felt different this year, Lila thought, as though the world itself were bathed in a new kind of light, gentle and enduring, filled with a quiet magic that she would carry with her always. The crystal lay in her hand, cool yet comforting, and she could almost hear her mother's voice, soft as the morning breeze. "Remember, my darling, I am always with you, closer than the moon, nearer than the stars." And so, as the sun rose and Christmas morning began, Lila knew that she had been given a gift far greater than she could have ever wished for. A love that was boundless, a memory that would light her path, and a magic that would stay with her, as constant as the stars. In the years that followed, whenever she felt lost or lonely, she would reach for the crystal, letting its quiet warmth fill her heart, letting the memory of that enchanted night lift her spirit. And though her mother was gone, Lila never truly felt alone, for she carried with her a light that would never fade, a love as infinite as the sky, a gift that went beyond wishes and dreams. And so the tale of Lila's Christmas wish came to a quiet close, a story of magic and memory, whispered in the silence of the heart, told in the language of dreams, held forever close by those who know the true magic of love.